if I'm being honest with you, I've always found God's reaction to the story of the Tower of Babel kind of confusing until today.
Now, the key verse, the key statements are all in verse 4. Number 1, they aim to build a city. Number 2, they aim to build a tower in the city that reaches up into the heavens. 3, they aim to make a name for themselves. 4, they aim not to be dispersed over the whole earth. The first 2 of those correspond to the second 2. Building a city corresponds to avoiding being dispersed. We're going to build a city. The walls around us. Safe, secure here, not going to spread. And building a tower that might reach into the heavens, of course, corresponds to, that would make a name for us if we could build such a tower. You could see it from so far away. We would be the center. So the city and the tower are the outward expressions of the sins in here. And what are the sins? Let's make these plain because they're yours and mine. Sin number 1, the love of human praise. There's not a person in this room who doesn't struggle with it. Not one. And the other sin is the love of security. Build a city. Cities represent security. Build a wall, run to the city. You can farm out there, but go in here at night. And we all struggle with the love of making our lives secure and making ourselves look good to other people. And when those are the dominating controls in our lives, we're this way. Now, God's will for human beings is not that we find our joy in the praise of men, but that we find our joy in knowing and praising Him.
So I think that his second explanation, which is what stood out to me at first, didn't make sense to me. I don't think that so much security was necessarily the intent there, right? With this, I mean, it's something that you could infer, definitely. So the story of the Tower of Babel, right? This happens after the Great Flood, right? Humanity is together; they have one language, right? And they settle in Babylon, and then they have this ambition, right? And the people decided to build a city and a tower that reaches the heavens, right? Their goal is to make a name for themselves and avoid being scattered. And I think like those are really the 2 main focal points of this passage. And truly, I think that this is why God intervenes, right? It says, God observes their efforts and sees their unified ambition as a potential path of unchecked pride, right? If we look at, let's see here, what I find weird is, and just because it's weird, I'm not saying that it's wrong or anything like that, but it says here, the Lord said, behold, they are one people and they all have the same language. And this is what they began to do. And now nothing which they purpose to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse them. So when I first read this, in the times that I had gone through it didn't make a lot of sense to me outside of, okay, God sees that they want to be like him or rival him in some way, show their strength, and this is why he scattered them. That's kind of like the context of what I thought, the only issue here was. But if we go back to Genesis, right, there is this command of not only being fruitful and multiply, but there's also a calling to subdue the earth, right? Which really implies, going out and, spreading throughout the earth. So this is the other sin that really stands out to me, which is that God gave a specific instruction for the people of earth, for humanity to spread out and multiply, and they strictly went against, what God had ordained. And this whole them wanting to make a name for themselves is kind of like, a good reference is the Titanic, right? The Titanic was an attempt to make the greatest ship ever, right? And a lot of it was based off of pride, and ultimately we've all seen the movie and we know the story that ultimately they overshot their shot, if you will, and it ended in an atrocity, right? A great many people died because of this. Now, this is similar to what we see in, for example, Death Note, which is a similar um, a, event, if you will, although this one is made up, right? Like light seeks to be like God, right? Deciding who can and who cannot die, and it also ends in tragedy. And I really do believe that part of the reason why God intervenes is that this unchecked pride would have caused even more destruction and calamity. And this is why he dispersed them. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about here is this concept of oftentimes what we've seen as a result. So oftentimes what we see in the Bible as a result of sin is separation from God. And it's kind of funny that, we understand that sin leads to death and it causes this separation from God, but we also see it in a lot of the actions that God takes in the Old Testament. If you look at what happened to Adam and Eve, for example, God separated himself from them. What do we see with Cain and Abel, right? Cain killing his brother. What we ultimately see is God again sending off Cain, right? Exiling him in a way, and also causing that separation. And that's really ultimately what happens as a result of the Tower of Babel, is that there is a separation that happens again. And in this case is with humanity, right? They're all scattered in their own way. And I think that, maybe security, according to Piper, is like a secondary sin or thing that happens here. But I truly believe that the primary things that we see here are two things. One is blatant disobedience to what God had commanded humanity to do, which was to scatter and to subdue the earth. And they did the opposite. They're like, okay, well, let's build a city. Let's come together and stay together and build this tower. And the building of the tower is that second sin, the original sin that we see from Eve and Adam, which is that they want to be greater than God. And God shuts it down right away. And I think that from the beginning of time, this is what we've seen from humanity. We're always seeking to be greater than God. And it's always led to destruction, has always led to separation from God. And I think that ultimately that is the ultimate lesson that we are to draw from the Tower of Babel, is that disobedience to God leads to destruction. And as humans, we are called to hold fast to God and to listen to his commandments, not so much try to usurp, right, the power of God. So I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments when you've read the story. Did it seem weird to you at first, God's reaction to the Tower of Babel and how these people were behaving? Let me know in the comments. And as always, just want to remind you that we must persevere. Peace.